So this just happened about 20 minutes ago. I just moved back home with my parents after a divorce, and they live sort of out in the woods, away from all the main roads. My old house that I just moved from was in the next town over and on a main road, so if you called the cops, they could be there in less than 2 seconds. Here, though, it can take quite a while sometimes. I'm sitting there having coffee on the couch. My daughter is in front of me playing on the floor. We were the only ones home at the moment. I walked out into the kitchen to make some more coffee. As I passed by the dining room windows, which look out onto the road in front of the house, I can see a man walking up the road. This was kind of weird. This was such a private area you would never really see cars or people unless they already lived there. I watched this man just slowly walking up the road. He stops right in front of the neighbor's house and stares into the window. Then he looks back over his shoulder. He did this a few times, and it was starting to look really suspicious. I slunk out into the entryway and locked the front door. I walked back into the kitchen, only to see he was still staring into the neighbor's house. I go into the back room and retrieve my gun. I stay there watching him out the window, but out of sight so he can't see me. After a while, he stopped looking into their house, and I watch him move forward and stop at our driveway instead. My daughter was still watching TV in the living room. I kept looking back at her and at him staring at her through the window. I took my cell phone out and called 911. I told them I thought someone was about to try to break into my house, and I gave them the address. They said they were sending someone ASAP and to keep the doors locked shut. I put my phone in my back pocket still on. I began to hear loud thumps at the front door. Again and again and again. I calmly walked over to the window next to the door and opened it, pointing the gun at the man's face. He stepped back a bit, clearly surprised. "Oh, wrong house." "Yeah, wrong house, sure." I kept my gun pointed at his face. He stared at me for a moment, which felt like 20 minutes, before turning around and leaving. I could still see him in view when the cops pulled up, so I pointed. They went and grabbed him. After grabbing him, they told me they'd found a lot of drugs on his person and 2 knives in his pocket as well. He had a lot of cash on him too, so he was definitely up to no good. This was February 2010, and I was 7 years old at the time. My mom would often let me walk home from school, as our apartment was just a small ways off from it. There were never any problems with this. One day though, when I was walking home from school, this black car pulled up right next to me. For the life of me, I just can't remember what kind it was. The window to the car rolled down slowly. I could see there was a woman with red hair in the driver's seat. She looked to be about 45 years old. The woman introduced herself as Erica and said she was my father's sister. My father had left before I was even born, and we didn't have any contact with his family. Although I didn't know much about my father at the time, I did know he had only brothers. Just days before, I had happened to have been curious about his history and asked my mom a lot of questions about him, one of them being if he had any siblings. Anyway, instead of telling this Erica that he didn't have any sisters or just walking away, I told her my name. She started asking questions like, "Where do you go to school? How's your brother?" I started to get really creeped out by these questions, especially since she seemed to know things about me she shouldn't. I told her I wasn't supposed to be talking to strangers and started to walk away. She continued to drive slowly next to me and kept saying she meant no harm. At this point, I got real scared. I started running, and she sped up and continued to follow me. When I got into my apartment complex, I ran up to my neighbor's house, acting like it was mine. That's what my brother had told me to do if I had ever been followed home. I looked back when I'd reached the door, and she began to drive away. I didn't tell my mom at the time because I didn't want her to stop letting me walk home alone from school. The next day, though, it happened again. This time, she offered me a ride. I told her no and to leave me alone, and once again, I started running over to the neighbor's house. Once again, she followed me all the way home. I still didn't tell my mom. The next day was Saturday. When I was playing at the basketball court with my brother, I saw that car drive by. I dragged my brother inside, telling him that I felt sick. That Sunday after church on the way home in the car, pulling into the complex, I could see her waiting outside. This time, she was not in her car. I remember she had a very big stomach and smaller legs. I got scared, and when we got out of the car, I ran inside. I looked out the living room window while my mom and brother went to go make lunch. I saw her walk over to the neighbor's house I'd ran over to. A few moments later, she walked away, and my neighbor came over to our house. He informed my mother a lady had just come looking for me, claiming she was my teacher, and she needed to talk to me about something on my own. When my mom heard this, she called me in. I started crying and told her everything. She started crying too, because she was scared of what could have happened. She told me now I had to wait for my brother, who was 13, to get out of school so we could all walk together. She also reported this to the police. Myself and my neighbor had to give a report. After this, I saw the car all the time and would point it out to my brother. We would always tell my mom as well. This all died down by the next April. We never got any word about if the police ever talked to her. I didn't see her for years after, and I forgot about it until yesterday. I was shopping at Albertsons with my best friend when I suddenly felt a tap on my shoulder. It was her. She introduced herself again as my aunt. My mouth just hung open in shock. I acted nice, but when she offered to take me to my house, I got scared. I grabbed my friend tight and ran away. I am very afraid. She still remembers me. She still tried to give me a ride and follow me, and she's still around. I already told my mom about this. We weren't sure what to do. I was 11 at the time this happened and living in a nice suburb area. We had recently moved into this house my parents had just built. It was our very first home versus a rented house in a sketchy area. It was a very nice neighborhood as well. The whole family made friends quickly, with lots of neighbors, especially though the ones 3 doors down from us. They had a daughter about my age. I'm male, by the way. They also had a daughter about 5 years younger, who was the same age as my sister. Our parents got along real well too. We began hanging out quite a lot for barbecues at their house, or parties over at our house. Friendships were very quickly formed, and they seemed to be very strong. After a year or so of spending time around them though, I started to realize things were not quite what they seemed. I remember seeing police cars at their house a few times in the evenings. When I'd ask my parents what was going on, it was always nothing, just checking in on them type answers. I'm no genius or anything like that, but even at 11 years old, that did not add up. If the cops would always check up on them, why didn't they ever do it for us? One day, I'm at their house playing and hanging out. The daughter goes across the street to get another mutual friend. This left myself and the father alone in the house. I didn't think this was too much of a big deal. It had happened quite a lot before. When he started to approach me this time though, he seemed off. I still don't know what made me feel this way, but I was very uncomfortable. I was immediately thinking about leaving. 5 minutes later, he tells me he has something really cool to show me. I don't remember quite what it was, but I think it was something having to do with baseball cards. I was very fond of collecting those at the time. I excitedly started to follow him. In this moment though, he pulled down the attic ladder and asked me to follow him up into that dark space. I did without hesitation, at least at first. Then something happened though. I still can't process what it was. He was ahead of me on the ladder. When he looked back to help me into the attic just off the lip, I knew something was wrong. There was something about his eyes, his face, his grin. It wasn't right. It looked evil. I can still see it clear as day. I guess that's what set my alarms off. Whatever it was plenty enough for me. I jumped off the top of the ladder and ran out the door. I sprinted all the way home. I was choking back tears as I burst through my front door. My mom was there when I came through. She could obviously see I was out of sorts and immediately started trying to calm me down. As I started to come back to my senses, I explained to her everything that had happened. My mom was concerned with how scared I was, but she mostly brushed it off to me being scared, young, and silly. I shit you not though, that exact same night, I was woken up at around 3 a.m. My mom was sitting on my bed, and as I awoke, I noticed she was holding me like a baby. I remember how she smelled and how tightly she held me. I remember her tears falling down onto my cheek. When I looked out the window to the neighbor's house, I could see it was surrounded by police cars and fire trucks. The neighbor had killed himself and his daughter in the attic after a long standoff with police. There isn't a doubt in my mind, nor my mother's, that would have been me had I made it into the attic with him. I still get chills thinking about it to this day. With the persistent nagging of my fiancé, I finally decided to share this story. It's probably one of the scariest things that's ever happened to me during my entire 40 years on this planet. I live with my fiancé and my youngest brother, who works in law enforcement. This will be semi-relevant to the story. We live in a smallish town just outside of Las Vegas. Surprisingly, we don't actually have that much crime for being so close by. We do have a little bit though, and we also have no shortage of tweakers and a growing population of homeless folk. Last summer, I was in between jobs and spent a great deal of time at the public library or at my father's business office. I was using the free Wi-Fi to try and browse jobs. It was around 4 o'clock in the afternoon when I returned home. We have this dog named Suki. She's a bull terrier cattle dog mix. She's very wary of strangers and can be a literal puppy terrorist too, so it makes her kind of the perfect watchdog. It was really hot that day, basically living in Satan's butthole. I was sweating profusely. I ran a tepid bath, turned on Spotify and grabbed a magazine. I locked myself in the bathroom. My doggo was outside the bathroom door whining. The big idiot hates water but loves to drop her toys into them so she can't grab them. Anyway, I'm mid-bath. I hear my dog losing her shit suddenly. I hear her sprint up the stairs, and then immediately, I hear someone else's voice. "Oh shit!" I freeze. I'm naked as a jaybird. I have no weapons. My brother's lockbox with his Glock is upstairs in that room, and my dog is now upstairs fighting off an intruder. I grab my phone. I hear the man yelling at my dog, who I'm pretty sure was now tearing into him. I dialed 911 and screamed I was calling the cops through the door. Cue him cursing. I'm sure he was trying his very best to pry that 55 pounds of crazy dog off of him. Somehow he actually managed to get away and burst through the back door. My dog took off on a tear after him. I talked to the dispatcher as I threw on some clothes and ran up the stairs. My dog came back inside prouder than ever, strutting about the house. I locked her in my brother's bedroom as the cops now show up. I really didn't need her biting one of them after this. Apparently, my neighbor had heard the barking and caught the guy. He was 125 pounds soaking wet, no shirt, and covered in dog bites and meth scars. Turns out he'd found our fake rock with the key and let himself inside. He was taken off, and cops told me not to use such a thing in the future. Well, no shit. I figured that one out on my own. My dog was fed a delicious steak, and I spent the next few weeks terrified some tweakers were going to break back in. We now keep 2 guns locked up, one upstairs and one downstairs. So a friend and I were swapping horror stories of retail the other day, and I was reminded about a time someone gave me a gut feeling to run. For context, at the time I was a teenager, working at a small coffee shop. It was just a short walk away from my house. I was a barista, which involved forcing myself to always be bubbly and smiling, despite the idiocy that transpired before some people got their coffee. As a result, I've had a few experiences where men take friendliness as flirting and try their luck on me, but no one quite liked this guy. He came in on a late Sunday afternoon shift when I was working alone. My coworker was far too sick to be touching food and had to go home early. The man was dressed in an unassuming leather jacket and jeans and looked to be in his early 40s. After ordering a small coffee and paying with small change as well, he started to try and hit on me over the counter. I brushed off all his attempts and handed him his coffee. Then he told me though that he recognized me. I must be from the area. Now, I'd never seen this guy before, so of course I kinda laughed nervously and denied it. Then he got even weirder though. "Oh, I've definitely seen you on campus. Do you go to so-and-so college?" I said no, given I'd never heard the name before in my life. "Oh, how about this one? Definitely this one then." This went on for over 10 minutes, as he listed at least 8 different schools I only recognized one of. It was clear there was no way he was a student at any of them. Well, caught out in the open, he moved around to the small door that opened to let us out from behind the counter to clean the shop. He tried to move past it and come behind the counter closer to me. Something really felt off. I was more than a little forceful with informing him that customers are not allowed back there. He kinda laughed and made a comment about how he knew he was just not a regular customer. I was just playing hard to get. I repeated that no one was allowed back there. His face instantly became dead serious, and he instantly shifted gears as well. "Huh, so you're working until closing, huh? What time do you guys close?" I followed my gut in that moment and lied to him that we closed at 2 a.m. In reality, it was 10 given it was a Sunday. He nodded. "Alright, I'll come back at 2 a.m. for you then." He left in a hurry. Given I've served some strange people at my time here, I tried to push this out of my mind and focus on my work for the rest of my shift. My manager wasn't there at the time like usual. He only ever came in on Thursdays or Fridays, so I didn't get a chance to bring this up then. Once I did on my next shift, he invited me to come into the office and watch the night security tapes just to ease my mind. Well, guess what? He really did come back at exactly 2 a.m. in a beat-up Honda on that Sunday night. The cameras caught him trying to force open the front door and crouching under the windows of the cafe to try and see past the shades we put down at night. Eventually, after like an hour, he stormed back to his car. It was one of the only 2 cars in the lot. I have no clue what this guy's intentions were, trying to break into the store to meet up with a teenage girl at 2 a.m. on a Sunday, but I've never seen him since. So a few years back, my boyfriend and best friend of 4 years had just dumped me. I was using this website called Meet Me to meet people in my area while I was in college. My profile very clearly stated I was not explicitly looking for anyone to date. I really just wanted to meet new people. I mean, I had just been dumped. I was trying to put myself out there, and I'm not really the type to go out anyway. In my area, there was a giant dance-a-thon that my university did every year to raise money for a children's hospital. Well, I received a message on there with someone asking me if I had ever heard of it. I told him my dance team usually performed there every year. He told me he was actually one of the children that was supported by the event in the past when he was younger. Well, I thought that was really cool. I started asking him a little bit about his experience. I genuinely began to think this guy was interesting. After a while, though, that conversation was kind of dead. I really didn't have much else to say. Plus, it was already getting late. I wanted to head off to bed. I told him this, but after about 10 minutes of laying in my bed trying to sleep, I got another notification. I glanced at it real fast. I could see instantly this dude had just sent me a novel. After this event, I swiftly deleted that account, so unfortunately, I don't have access to that exact message. I'll try and do my best to remember though. I think the first one went a little something like, "Look, I'll be honest, I really want to keep talking to you. In fact, I'd really like to take you on a date sometime. You seem like a nice girl, sweet, interesting. I think we would get along extremely well. I'm kind of all alone in this world, you know. Insert a long-winded commentary about how lonely he was. I responded and told him I was not interested. He was almost a decade older than me, and I was 20 at the time. I tried to say goodnight again. He responded with another novel.
No, I don't think you understand. You are perfect for me. You were made for me. I'm sure of it. God speaks to me, you know. He wants us to be together, and we will be. One day you'll be mine, no matter what. I was trying to be polite because he was so nice earlier, but I guess I was too naive. I didn't totally know what to do, but I responded trying to let him down easy. Here are some highlights of the rest of the things he said. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but God has decided this. Who are we to deny him of his plan? Someday in the future, we will get together, and you'll realize it soon enough. We're gonna have 3 children, he said, and I know their names, 2 boys and 1 girl. He spoke their names into my ears. I wrote them down when I was 7 years old. I still have the paper. Do you know how I know you're going to be my wife? Because I wrote your name down with it. You will be mine. Don't make a mistake. God is talking to me now. He's whispering your name to me, so I can't let you leave. At that point, I blocked and reported him. I noped the hell off that site and went to bed very creeped out. The morning came. He had found me on Facebook. He was going on and on, starting with comments about lines like, "Where did you go? How could you do this to me? You're denying God's fate." He did this all day. I freaked out. I told him to leave me alone, and I blocked him as much as I could. I deleted all of my social media apps off my phone for the next few days. I asked my roommates to stay with me too. They agreed after I told them what happened. I was actually genuinely afraid this dude was going to come find me. I mean, he was a local. When we'd been having a nice conversation, I'd also told him my major and some clubs I was in. He could have showed up anywhere. So far, though, I haven't seen him again after, but I'm not holding my breath. This happened a couple of months ago. It feels hollow to put a catchy title on what happened to me because it freaked me the fuck out for a while, but I think it fits to share. I was driving home from work at 2 a.m. I'm a nurse and I live in a small city. The roads were totally deserted and it was a freezing night. I don't live that far from work, maybe just a couple of miles or so. I'm driving down a residential street around the corner from my house when I see a man lying face down in the street. Now, remember, I'm a nurse. My first thought was, great, now I gotta help this guy up. I was just coming off a very long shift, and I know falls can happen at any time. As I slowed down the car though, I suddenly realized just what an idiot move that was. I was a 100-pound woman, and I didn't have any weapons either. I thought I should do something to help the guy still though, so I called 911 as I drove past him and slowed to a stop at the end of the block. While I was stopped at the light, I explained to the dispatcher that there was a man in the middle of the road who might need some medical assistance. All of a sudden though, I hear a loud bang, bang from the driver's side window. I screamed and looked over. A man was pounding on my window, jiggling the handle of my locked car. I looked into the rearview mirror, only to see the man was no longer laying in the street. Still on the phone with 911 though, I screamed what was happening to the dispatcher and floored it through the red light. I told him everything that happened, and even though I was right by my house, he told me to keep driving instead. After a few minutes I had calmed down. He told me to loop back around. I pulled over down the road from my house and stayed in my car hidden. Now I couldn't see the man anywhere. I got off the phone with the dispatcher, who told me they were sending a car to the area immediately. As I gathered up my things to do one last final scan, I saw the man. He was now walking with 2 other men, holding weapons. I hunched away in my car until they were far down the road. Then I bolted into my house. I can't really say for sure he had ill intent, but it definitely freaks me out that he was not alone. Always lock your car doors and carry mace as well. So, I work at a GameStop. It's a great job, honestly, and I'm surrounded by things that I enjoy. Games, anime, all that kind of stuff. I am somewhat attractive, or so I've been told occasionally. I'm not saying this to try and be conceited. I'm just saying this to let you know that people bother me a lot because of it. I've even been told from my manager that that's the only reason he hired me, because a large percentage of the customers are male. This post is about one particular customer I encountered. I mainly work on the registers. This job consists of greeting people when they walk in, and of course, working the register. It was getting close to closing time, and I was the only one up front. I was getting started with my closing duties when I heard the buzzer that goes off when the door opens. Without even looking over, I welcomed the customer. "Hi there, welcome to GameStop. Let me know if there's anything I can help you find." Normally, I'd at least get a hello or they'd respond with a question, but it was dead silent. I looked up from the counter. I saw the man that had just entered the door, staring right at me. Once my eyes met his, he immediately looked away and started looking at games on the shelves. I shrugged it off. It was normal for male customers to sometimes not greet me, mostly because they thought since I'm a female, I didn't have valid knowledge about games. I continued with my closing duties. I was bent behind the counter when I felt someone standing on the other side. It was the man. He put his games onto the counter and said not a single thing. I grabbed the proper ones from the drawers and proceeded with the normal questions we had to ask. "Did you find everything all right? Do you have a phone number with us? Do you want us to protect this game for you?" My questions got met with silence though. All the guy did was stare. I turned my attention back to the register, and while finishing up the transcription, I could feel his eyes digging into the side of my head. I printed out his receipt, put his games in the bag, and he turned around to leave after grabbing them. I shrugged this interaction off. Again, this was not out of the ordinary for me. It was almost time for me to pull down the gates and lock up, when I got a call over the phone. I groaned. Must be another customer trying to wiggle their way in before we close. I pick up the phone, only to hear heavy breathing. Hi, thank you for calling GameStop. This is blank. How may I help you?"
"Oh, I was just inside purchasing some games."
"Oh, was something wrong with the purchase?"
"No, I'm just calling to let you know I received your signals."
At this point, I was very confused. "I'm not sure what you mean, sir."
"I'm calling to let you know I picked them up. You're beautiful, and your signals were well received. When do you get off? I'll be waiting outside for you."
At this point in the conversation, I hung up. I rushed forward and closed the gates immediately and started locking up the store. I went into the back and told my manager about the call. He said after I finished closing up, he would take me home. My apartment complex was very close by, so normally I would walk. As I was quickly replacing the trash bags, I saw a car pull up right in front of the store and park, then shut its lights off. No one got out. Luckily, my manager had parked out back, so instead of going out the front door, we left through that way. I never saw that guy again after, but every time I walk home now at night, I think about that one particular customer.